Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Oh, hello, friends. Hello. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find another long thing to play before we start the show.
Our thing is slightly shorter than the HBO feature presentation fanfare from 1983.
That is true. That is
I'm
absolutely
gratified
true.
by that. And it has some useful information in it that other thing doesn't have.
That's true. That's true. Our the voice of the show, our wonderful AI Sarah, has some imparts some good wisdom to our listeners. Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're back joining you again at the end of September. Here, fall is in the air, and like school is in full swing. And when I think of school, I think of after school. And when I think of after school, I think about wondering what's on cable. So that is what we are going to talk about today. We are going to visit the early days of pay television with a little episode that we are calling "I Saw It on HBO." Woo. And in this year we are going to be talking about the movies from 1980 to 1983. So we were this is in the very dawn of cable television and HBO, not having a whole lot of what am I trying to think of content of not many titles, I guess, that they could play.
It's a lot like the early days in MTV, where if you had made a video, even if you missed the top 40, even if your video was made in 1981 and it was now 1983, back when MTV was a radio station with video, they just would have to fill it up with songs, and a lot of the hit songs of the day didn't even have videos, so they really had, beggars couldn't be choosers at that point. Essentially, right. you were all songs all the time, with some news breaks and maybe a concert on the weekend. That was the channel. And HBO, of course, it had a whole, century of films really to choose from almost, but it wasn't going to sell subscriptions by playing the Maltese Falcon, or what I mean? Like, it really couldn't. Yep. It really had to be current, which means it had to be like the new release wall at the Blockbuster. It had to give you what was new and hot that you had missed. That's what people were interested in. And so as a consequence, it played every movie that it could get the rights to show, which at that time were relatively cheap. And it actually had to eschew big films like Superman 78 and some of those type of things that might have gotten watched a lot. The rights for those were really expensive, and the networks would outbid them for them to show them exclusively. It was an era where that Sunday night at the movies from ABC, like, that was a big deal. And that when you first saw a big theatrical movie on TV, 3 years later, its network premiere was a big deal. And as a result, HBO, not completely, but to some degree, were left scrounging for the sort of leftovers of that. So it was a lot of films over and over again, and it was a lot of films that weren't big hit movies whose rights were easy to secure for long periods of time. And hidden in there, and you can argue with us as to whether any of these are gems or not, or but truly hidden in there were films that, had they had marketing, had they been easier to market, or what have you, would have found their audiences, because they did find them on HBO.
Right.
A friend of the show, Bill, has been asking me to do this show for a long time, and I apologize to him in advance. Some of our favorites aren't on here. There aren't science fiction and fantasy movies and stuff. Those tend to find their way onto their own shows, although we're certainly part of the picture here, a big part of it.
Yeah.
And there's some other things that we sort of skipped, but I think we got a pretty good collection of adventure films and comedies and things that, with only an exception or two, really wouldn't find their way onto another list. So
yeah, and that was the big qualifier here. Is just like, well, boy, is that gonna make it onto a different list? So maybe we don't talk about it here. These ones that we are talking about, all really, a lot of them really, really cool movies. The thing about movies like this is, the people that are our age, that we grew up watching these things over and over and over again on HBO.
Right.
The people that are now making movies are our generation. And there are influences. There are, you see, you see some of these films kind of creeping into the styles and into some of the just into current filmmaking. And
it starts with our tagline that we stole from Dennis Miller. He used to say HBO stood for "Hey, Beastmaster's on," because Beastmaster used to get played
all the time. Yeah,
you didn't have to tape it onto a tape to watch it. It just really, if you hung out long enough, it was like a rerun of Law and Order. If you just turn a couple channels, you will find one. It is happening right now.
Yep.
And that really felt like it was true of Beastmaster more than any. Beastmaster, the dark fantasy, the third most popular dark fantasy of 1982. But we've talked about it on the show before. I vastly prefer it to Conan the Barbarian and the other more ballyhooed films of that year, because there's a weird, wicked sort of magic, and because of the animals, I think, is what does it.
Yeah.
Because of the animals, there's a childlike window into this really horrific, overly sexualized, super violent, PG-rated film.
I defy you to watch Beastmaster and not want to ferret afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And, we've talked about that phenomenon on the show, but we're not going to go into Beastmaster. It's not part of this list because, like I said, it had its own list, and maybe we never got too into it. Maybe Beastmaster will even be a deep dive at some point. It's deep dive worthy.
Well, hey, any chance to talk about Mark Singer and for me to get that Mark Singer wig out?
Mark Singer in a loincloth. You're gonna wear the loincloth too? I dare you.
I don't think any of our listeners. Oh, well, I mean, that would be one that I'm definitely like, hey, listen to this podcast. Don't check, maybe not check out the YouTube version of it.
This is the one where the visual aspect is a detriment to your enjoyment. But Beastmaster, I mean, truly, I did tape it off of Showtime, as it was the HBO Junior, and which they were given away when we finally got cable with for free for some months, in hopes that you would forget to unsubscribe from it. And luckily, my dad did just that. Forgot that it was part of his bill.
Yep.
But we never did have HBO growing up, but it's all the same. It's the same all over. You know what I mean? The experience is very much the same. So we're going to start out. We're actually, the first movie on our list is a 1979 movie, but that really was proliferated on pay cable during the 80s. And this is a film we've talked about before too, and a film that won't likely get a deep dive, even though it is much beloved. I viewed this movie as more of a video store movie than a HBO movie, but I think it fits this category and starts out great. And it's a film, oddly enough, despite its two big stars that are in it, it's a forgotten movie of both of theirs
Yeah.
in a very real way, in a way that a good portion of you listening will have never seen this or maybe even never heard of it, because it did have a renaissance on pay cable and at the video store, but that didn't last the way it did for some of these to the modern day. It's
Yep.
when that phenomena went away, it sort of also went away. So Joel, I'll let you.
Yeah. So yeah, like Ryan said, this is from 1979, but it really, I certainly didn't see it until 1980. And that is The Frisco Kid, starring Gene Wilder and Harrison Ford.
Even seeing their names come across the screen, I believe it's one of those moments, title cards, where they're credited together, but like Gene Wilder's in the upper left-hand corner, yep, and Harrison's down in the bottom right. Because Gene Wilder was the bigger star in 1979. But just seeing their names together, and even the way this movie opens, like it takes a long time for the cocky gunslinger to show up in the movie. It really is about this European Hasidic Jewish rabbi who's sent on a journey all the way to San Francisco, the California gold mining boomtown, which now has a big enough Jewish population that they want to have a synagogue. They don't even have a Torah. They don't even have the Holy Scripture out there with them. So he's bringing the Old Testament. They don't call it that, but you're following me. The word Torah, I think, is the most spoken word in the whole film. They say it 100 times, all the characters. But he's bringing this out to them, and then he's going to be their rabbi and their teacher. And in exchange, he's being given the eldest daughter of the elder of the Jewish people he's been sent a photo of to marry. And she's very, I don't know what the term they used back then, Joel, buxom, is that what you call it?
Yeah, I would go with buxom. That's solid.
So she jumps out of this family photo that they sent to Poland. And he's being sent for a couple of reasons. First of all, you get the idea from the opening council scene that he's this, he doesn't fit, a misfit basically amongst his own people. And the elder guy of this council believes that this will be good for him. Like this is his chance to make his own way, to grow up a little bit. Gene Wilder plays such a good-hearted and wonderful character in this. It's really one of my it's one of my favorite performances of his, truly, because there's this, he's a really wise person, but he's really, really naive and really, really innocent at the same time. And those two things combine magically into this guy that comes to life. And that's worthy sort of what Gene Wilder was in real life, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There always was a gentleness to his, I mean, I should say he could bring a gentleness to his characters. That always, that he, no matter who he was playing, there always seemed to be a soft and nougaty center. And in a good way.
Right. And the same is true of Harrison. After a bunch of misadventures in the New World, he finds himself crossing paths a couple of times with this bank robber character, this outlaw played by Harrison Ford, who also is it's a great role for him too, because it's all bravado and but he's really a dude with a sort of mushy center as well. I don't know how to explain it.
He's got a crunchier crust.
Right. But it's a buddy road trip movie. They both get in trouble. They both find each other kind of on the run together. And then they both decide, Gene Wilder's character really decides, that they should go out to California together. And it's hard to explain. They break up and come back together a bunch of different ways. The gags are pretty silly. The script is not particularly good or nuanced in any way. It's the last film, I believe, directed by the great, and I'll call him the great, Robert Aldrich, who directed, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane or whatever, and Dirty Dozen he directed, and what's the one with the plane in the desert where they build the other plane to get them out?
What is that one? Come on, where's the filmography here?
That's my favorite film of his.
Okay.
Actually, I'm forgetting the name of it.
Yeah, it is
Flight of the Phoenix.
Flight of the Phoenix. Yep. There.
So anyway, Aldrich directed war films and sort of exploitation films. In this case, in the case of Betty Davis and whatever, with old aging stars. He was a Warner Brothers. Didn't only make films at Warner Brothers, but he was largely a Warner Brothers stock director. And Warner appreciated him because he made movies that made money, but they never really thought much of him as an artist. And as a result, he sort of kicked around and stuff. So this is a Warner Brothers film, and I love it. I love it. I watched it just every time I could when I was a kid. I love Harrison Ford as a cowboy. It's super fun. He knows he's in a comedy and is having a really good time, and yet Harrison brings it, like a guy who was about to be a movie star should. He really brings it in the key moments. And Wilder is at the top of his game here, and for that reason, this really should have been a hit. And it just wasn't. And I don't know why. I don't know what the difference is between this and, I guess I kind of do, but this, to me, this should have gotten more attention than it did in theaters, but it came and went with an absolute whimper in theaters. Nobody saw it. Yeah. And because of the star power, what?
As I was reading here, like Roger Ebert, a couple of them here talk about how Cat Ballou was such a big, was a much bigger hit for a comic Western that this.
Yeah, in 1973. I mean, there's room for.
Yeah, whatever. It's come up here. I guess I should say it's coming up a bunch. It's coming up twice here. But yeah, I mean, it's as Vincent Canby described it as harmless chaos.
Right. I guess there's not a lot of chaos to it. It really is the chemistry between these two guys and the little misadventures that they end up at a monastery in a sequence. I think is really funny. Wilder's fantastic in it. They end up captured by some really nice Indians, as Wilder's character calls it.
Yep.
Who, the chief Native American character is played by this old Italian guy, of course. Like, it has all these tropes and things that the Westerns of old had, and it is having some fun with those in a really neat way. And I just, like I say, I love it because it has a ton of heart. It's got a lot more heart than Cat Ballou has.
Yep.
Because Cat Ballou really is chaos. It really is nonsense. We talked about that with the Three Musketeers films. Dick Lester's Three Musketeers films are fun, but there's no heart there. It's not that it's a mean-spirited evil film, like it has no heart. There's nothing there to glom onto. There's nothing there that represents humanity. It is all just a big zany send-up. And yeah, people like Roger Ebert, no offense, may rest in peace, greatest of all time, etc. That's what he liked. That's what the generation likes. Our generation liked something a little sweet. We're the E.T. generation. E.T. hadn't come out yet, but that's what we connect with. We connect with those connections and things.
Oh, sorry, you said E.T. this morning. Just real sidebar, apropos of nothing. We had some Neil Diamond playing this morning because my 10-year-old's big into Neil Diamond.
Oh yeah, and Heartlight was playing.
Heartlight came on, and I'm just like sitting there driving as we're listening to Turn On Your Heartlight, and I'm like, yeah.
I had to give a toast at a wedding where when I was 19. My friend Denise's wedding, she was getting married. She was a year older than me, but still, I thought really young.
Yeah.
But either way, I was asked to come read during the service at the wedding and give a toast at the dinner. And I'm like, I didn't know how to do that when I was 19. Like I really didn't know how. But the whole family were these dyed-in-the-wool Neil Diamond fans. So I read the lyrics to Heartlight out loud as the toast. I did like a poetic reading of it.
That's spectacular. I love it.
Which is fun because you don't, even if you know that song, like until you get to the chorus, you don't really know what you're hearing when somebody's just reading it out loud. So it worked like a charm. Thank God.
We're going to take a ride across the moon. All right. Back to Frisco Kid here real quick. I love this. Jordan Hiller called it, critic Jordan Hiller called it one of the 25 essential Jewish movies. And here's what I really like this. What he called it. He praised it for its uncommon innocence and unself-conscious humility.
He gets it.
And I think that kind of nails it.
He gets it.
Yeah.
It's a film about these two misfit people who find each other and find what is clearly a lifelong friendship that they're going to have. They achieve, a down on his luck sort of a guy who's truly going down the wrong path, runs into a rabbi, a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And learns important stuff about himself. And the teacher learns a lot as well. And it just is wonderful. It's cheap, it's corny, it's all that stuff. It really is. So we don't want to sell it as some sort of perfect film, but I love that review. That review is exactly what it is. And the appeal of the thing, it has plenty of funny jokes, plenty of funny gags, but the appeal of the thing is its heart. And it's this sweet story of these people who find each other and really need each other, just, for their, to get what they're doing to accomplish their mission, but also to be changed by one another. It's almost a romance in that way. And I really do love it for that reason. So there's the scene late in it before we move on. It's one of my favorite scenes of all time. Gene Wilder has come to the point in the story where he just thinks he's gone wrong and he's no longer worthy of being a rabbi. And he's certainly no longer worthy of any, like he's lost that, he's never been a cocky character, but he's lost that self-righteousness that he comes into this character with. He really has been tested in a lot of ways, and he feels he's failed the test. So he still wants to deliver the Torah to his family. So he dresses up in Harrison Ford's clothes and tries to pretend he's him and tries to do an impression of him while he's giving this Jewish family, their holy book. And it just, it's good. Just one of the greatest things that I've ever seen at the movies. I love that scene. I love that scene so much. Yeah,
I'd forgotten how wonderful that is. Yeah.
And almost as good as when he meets up at the saloon with Harrison and tells him that their confrontation is absolutely fantastic as well. But that scene of him, howdy, just trying to be this other person. It's wonderful. Yeah. And Deborah, I can't remember her last name, Valen something, from the Warriors and from that Ted Knight TV show and stuff. I can't remember her whole name, but she's a really good actor, and she's the one who answers the door that he gives this performance for, and she's great in it too, because it's a scene like that. The whole beauty of the film is that you don't catch it winking unless it's okay for us all to be in on the joke. When something's important to these characters, it plays it straight, and it's just wonderful. So. Frisco Kid,
go see it. Go seek it out. I'm sure it's out there.
If you don't know, and give me a ring. I got it. I'm always willing to watch Frisco Kid.
Speaking of heart, this next film is all about what the heart wants.
Is it?
I don't know.
You say so.
I was like, how am I going to transition to this? We're gonna. Next up is also not from 1980. It is the movie that gave us Brooke Shields. And
well, not really.
Well,
couple of Brooke Shields movies on this list.
But this is The Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, which was a decent sized hit in the theater, and it was certainly a big story because it was a famous book and how you were going to translate it to the screen is tough, because like Frisco Kid, there's an innocence to this story of these two kids growing up on a deserted island together, absent any sort of adult supervision or really any remnants of society. They've both been raised to be certain kinds of people, but it's Lord of the Flies, except very conveniently, it's a super attractive guy and girl, and no third person to cause them really any drama beyond what they can cause themselves. That really helps. In No Exit, it's very deliberately three people, or there's a great scene in something where it's like, women are weird. I mean, with just two of us, it's okay. But if you add a third, it's two of them always start scheming against the other or whatever,
Yep.
The beauty of this story, other than some very useless supervision from the captain of the ship that has run ashore on this Pacific island, who's an alcoholic and who quickly dies and leaves the picture. Spoiler alert, I guess, for Blue Lagoon. It's just these two kids. And that's the idea behind the book. It was directed by Randall Kleiser, most famous for directing Grease. But he's mostly a family film type of directing guy. And this is sort of a family film, even though it's got a lot of salacious stuff in it, underage nudity. It's coming of age, the female character has her first period, and they start out really as kids, but by the end of the movie, they're very much a couple and a team. So when I talk about Blue Lagoon being on HBO, I talk about it that way because this was not the kind of movie, I don't know, Joel's parents brought them to see a bunch of twisted stuff, but my folks in a million years would never, ever dream of bringing us to Blue Lagoon, at the drive-in and just telling us to fall asleep in the back seat. That was never going to happen.
Yeah.
Me and my brothers were not even capable of pretending to be asleep, to be honest. Maybe one at a time, but not when put together in a back seat. There's no chance of that. So, we saw this, our generation saw this when it was on cable, because here it is, 3:00 in the afternoon, and they're playing Blue Lagoon. And Blue Lagoon is at its heart, it's an adventure story. It's Robinson Crusoe. The fact that it's two teenagers is, when you're a kid, it's you kind of get the meaning of it, but it's almost beside the point. This is a trapped on a desert island film, and that's the appeal of it, I think, when you're younger. Brooke Shields, I can't remember how old she was, 15 or 16 or something. William Cott, the guy, he was quite a bit, he's like in his early 20s.
You mean Christopher Atkins?
Oh, Chris Atkins. He wasn't then. He was a little younger.
Yep.
Sorry. William Cott's hair, I do believe, makes an appearance in it, though. I get them a little mixed up because of the hair. Sure. Both have these weird blonde late 70s sort of permed hairs.
Yes.
Christopher Atkins, he was a little older, maybe not early 20s, but either way, it was a big deal. It was a big babysitting job for all the, first assistant directors and PAs working on the film, was to satisfy Brooke's mom that she wasn't being exploited. And, in that way, it was great. Brooke Shields was, this is her first movie, but she was a big time, like world famous supermodel already. And it was a story for that reason. So, but she was a pretty, I have to say, and you can read, she's got autobiography and stuff, but she was a pretty well protected kid in a way that some certainly weren't, who were celebrities, at such an early age. So I always feel okay about watching this movie for that reason. The two of them have real chemistry and stuff. They get in these childish fights with each other. It's all shot beautifully in the same place they made Black Stallion the year before, which is another really good one. We watched on HBO a lot, but doesn't qualify because that was a monster hit film. Yeah. I like Blue Lagoon, and I think it sort of fits with this. More, like I said, more because HBO was your chance to watch this kind of thing, youngins. Yep. It was a PG-rated film, despite some of the nude stuff and stuff in the sexual, I don't want to say innuendo, but intense sort of sexual tension and sexual subtext at the heart of the story. I don't think you're telling a story about people this age, unless it really is about that to some degree. And
right.
It's not a good film, but it's much better than its sort of salacious, cheesy. When you hear the name, you think of something.
Yeah, it's become sort of a punchline in popular culture.
Right.
But no,
you're the star of the Blue Lagoon, and I'm the blue-haired goon. Blue-haired goon? Who writes this crap? There's a Simpsons reference.
Yep. Shields was 14, but all the nude scenes were performed by the 32-year-old stunt double, Kathy Trout. Yeah. And Atkins was 18, so he did all of his own stuff. How different would this movie have been had John Belushi played the Christopher Atkins role?
I don't know. Really super different. Who's asking that question?
No, apparently that he was up for consideration for the role, but they thought he was too
at
funny.
This time he was opening films. He was up consideration for everything.
Yeah, probably.
But
that just jumped out at me as what? No, you need the part of the whole thing about this movie is that they are gorgeous. They're gorgeous people.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah.
It's a Garden of Eden story, truly. And they are, whether they do their own nude scenes or not, they're 92% naked the entire time.
Yeah.
And that's unmistakable. So, it's interesting. It's an interesting movie, but it's really kind of a neat movie that I think, deserves to not, I mean, at this point it is what it is, but it deserves to be more than a punchline. It deserves to be judged on its own merits if you've never seen it. And it certainly was a early pay cable staple, no question.
Yeah. Oh,
because it
absolutely.
was not a show that you could it was not, although I'm sure it had a network TV premiere, it was not a movie you could easily play on network TV.
Right. Yeah. It's hard. You couldn't
really
cut around it.
Yeah. It up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Because this was before the age of we could just go in and digitally blur bits and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although they blurred some things, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It wouldn't be
more to the point. It's the letter writing campaigns and the complaints and stuff that you'd have got for playing such a thing.
Yep.
Blurred or not, and blur out all the nipples you want. It's still a thing. Still is what it is. It's still about that kind of stuff. So there you go.
All right. Next up is this one's an interesting movie because of the Sony and Marvel battle for superheroes and stuff. But back in 1981, there was an early version of Venom that, no, I'm kidding. This is a very different film.
How dare you bring your Marvel fandom into this episode? I will never forgive you for that.
No, 1981's Venom is a British horror film that just has, think of a bonkers 70s, early 80s era actor that's just kind of gonzo. And as we were saying before we started recording, problematic actor. They're in this film.
It's really just a crime movie. It's a kidnapping movie. So it has a horror movie poster.
Yeah.
So it's often considered a horror movie, but you don't want to, hey, horror buffs, this isn't for you. Although you may enjoy it, there's no real horror. It's the house that the home invasion takes place in has a poisonous snake in it that gets loose in the house, and that's it adds a lot of tension to these scenes when that snake shows up. To all of a sudden it's about that thing, and that's of course where the title comes from. But it's really it's like a heist movie. It's a very complicated crime, heist, kidnapping, whatever story. I won't get into the details of the crime because it just. Do you have a synopsis there where you can at least read us that?
I do, but I also want to give you the tagline that's on the poster.
Oh yeah, go for it. It's a good
the
one.
Mystery of the birds, the danger of Psycho, the evil of The Omen, the terror of Jaws. Now, the ultimate in suspense.
Yeah. That's good.
Like,
nothing
wow.
like naming 4 vastly better movies right on your poster.
All right, so just to mention, you know, we talked about some of the actors that were in here. Klaus Kinski is in it. Nicole Williamson, Oliver Reed. Oh man, just
Oliver Reed's the head of the family. Nicole Williamson is the detective inspector on the case. They're all well cast in these roles. Kinski's the main bad guy. Klaus Kinski very famously turned down the role of Tote in Raiders of the Lost Ark to do this movie because this movie was shooting in London and he didn't want to travel to some faraway land to have to make the movie.
Yep.
They offered him the same amount of money. So, hey, Venom, here I come. Of course, that's kismet and that's good news. It's good news for Ronald Lacey, who's one of the all-time like cool dudes in British cinema, got that role instead, and he's so good in it that it's kind of like, I get what Spielberg's saying. Kinski, I mean, that's number 1 on your list. I even understand why, but I think you get a madman when you hire him, whereas when you hired Lacey, you get a performance. And I think Raiders is better off for having the performance, in my opinion. Yeah. Whereas Venom, probably better to have the crazy. You got all these guys drinking like nuts on the, you know, in between shots. It was an incredibly dramatic shoot in that way.
Let me give you the storyline, the plot, the quick plot synopsis. International terrorists attempt to kidnap a wealthy couple's child. Their plan becomes unstuck when a deadly black mamba, sent by mistake instead of a harmless snake, escapes, and the terrorists and several hostages are trapped in the boys' London home. A tense evening is had by all as the snake creeps around the house, picking off the various characters one by one.
Ooh, that's a terrible synopsis.
Yeah, it's not great.
It should have stopped about halfway through. Otherwise, it explains why the snake is there in a very clever way, which is good. Venom's not a good movie at all. It's a really fun, bad movie from that era. And in that way, I really, really like it. You know, Oliver Reed is only as good as the material he's in, but he's never boring. And neither is Nicole Williamson, and neither is Kinski. Who's the woman in it? Kind of famous, tall, blonde lady. I can't remember her name.
Oh my gosh.
Susan something, maybe.
I was just looking at another little.
Yeah, that synopsis took up the whole page there that you just read.
Sarah Miles.
Really?
Or are you thinking of Cornelia Sharp?
No.
Or Susan George. Susan George. Sorry. They have them so listed.
Sophia Miles is in it. I didn't know that. Who's she playing it?
She plays Dr. Marion Stowe.
Oh, okay. She's okay. A famous actor in a tiny part that's kind of an important scene. Okay, that makes more sense. Wow, Sarah Miles though, that's awesome. Susan George is who I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
Susan George is featured in it in a big way, and all the gentlemen of the era were really super into her. It's fun. It's really bad but fun. If you're into that kind of film and you missed this. But it isn't a horror movie. It just isn't. That snake is not Jaws. It just isn't. That is not it. There are entire swaths of the film where you're not thinking about the snake at all. So it's just not a snake horror film.
Yeah.
If you want a snake horror film from a similar era, we recommend, or to you Europeans out there, Snake, which we've talked about on a previous episode.
Oh, that was a long time ago. We talked about that one.
It was, but it's a similar kind of film. Although too old to make the new release wall at the HBO archives.
Sure.
75 and very 70s-ish. This Venom was 80 and it feels like a 1964 film, honestly, but it still qualified, and it's pretty fun.
All right, next up is a movie I will freely admit I have not seen. 1981's Eye of the Needle with Donald Sutherland.
Ken Follett's Eye of the Needle. So it's based on a rather for Ken Follett, who writes books that are as big as the King James Bible. It's a very small, sort of lean and mean thriller story for him. During World War II, this cat played by Donald Sutherland, the Needle is his code name. He's a spy for Germany and England. And he makes his way, due to several misadventures that we won't really go into, to this small island and to this house where Kate Nelligan is taking care of her husband, or father or something. Husband, who's in a wheelchair and was injured during the war, I want to say. So they're having so it's very Hitchcockian setup, basically. Another kind of home invasion movie. Eye of the Needle was shot by Richard Marquand, who went on to direct, probably most famously, Return of the Jedi. And this was the film, although he was not the first choice for Return of the Jedi. We've talked about that a few times. But this was the film where they looked at it and said, oh, this guy's really good. Is he in the Union? No? Cool, hire him. Because Return of the Jedi needed a non-Directors Guild person to direct it. Or Steven Spielberg would have directed it. Because of George Lucas's battle with the Union over having to have a director credited before the title of his films. That's all it was, but that's all it took. And it's been a battle between them ever since. He resigned in protest. And for they later laid off of this, but for these big self-produced films, they wouldn't let him, or wouldn't let him isn't the right term, strongly discourage their members from working with him on these films. Irvin Kershner was at the center of that fight. He actually got to make the film, but Marquand wasn't. He was a British director and was not in the Hollywood Directors Guild, so he was able to do the film. That's the big, long, convoluted story. But this film's got some really arresting shots in it. It takes place all during the rain, and it's just very moody and intense. It's let down by when, the whole setup is so genius and wonderful and intriguing that when they actually get to the house and it's just a old drunk invalid fighting with his wife and this evil Nazi double agent trying to seduce her, and Kate Nelligan's great in it. She's trying to find her way through all this conspiracy stuff. It's an interesting film in that way. Like I say, the end doesn't really live up to the beginning, but the beginning's so cool. There's this just shot. It's really like Lynchian almost of him escaping the city, and he's kind of going under this rail bridge and sneaking around. And his whole escape is this sort of wordless thing that just feels unmistakably English and noirish and really moody and cool. And Donald Sutherland is really having a fun time during this era, underplaying this guy, this soft-spoken man, a few words spy character who has sort of a evil but still sort of survivalist core to him. It's not a bad movie. It's fun. And I remember seeing it on pay cable. It wasn't a huge hit when it came out. Oh, it was an okay hit. It's a very adult movie, so it's legend. The family movies of the era, even the ones that are bad, or the genre movies, like those sort of take on a life of their own, and their legend endures in a weird way. Logan's Run, or if we're talking 1980, Flash Gordon, it's not like any of these were good, but they carried into the future because of their genre trappings. Eye of the Needle is it's just a novel adaptation, like Blue Lagoon, that, that doesn't even have the benefit of having a punchline like Reputation. So right. I put it on the list. It's better than Venom.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds cool.
Maybe a little more boring than Venom, too hard to say.
All right. Well, next up, another film based on pretty, on a famous author's book. We're going to go to the world of John Steinbeck, and we're going to do Cannery Row.
Yeah, this is great. This is actually based on two John Steinbeck stories that they've combined into one movie. Do you have the names of the stories there? Yeah, Cannery Row and Sweet Thursday. Sweet Thursday. Sweet Thursday is one of the funnest short stories that you'll ever read. And the two don't sit super well together, but this film has a lot going for it. One, from a scenic design standpoint, it's a little stagey, but if you can get over that, they rebuilt this wharf town from scratch. Basically, they just built the whole thing, and the sets and the world of the story take on a storybook quality to them, because it doesn't feel like a real place. It feels like a staged place. Yeah, but it really does transport you to another world in a way that this film, if they'd just kind of made it straight up, or modernized it, which would have been tragic because it's very much a Depression era film.
Right.
It doesn't, and I really find that stuff neat. That and Nick Nolte at his roguishly best looking, although he mentioned that this was the first movie where they made him wear a girdle, which he named the Richard Dreyfuss special. I don't know why that's funny to me. It's funny that he had to wear it, was happy to talk about it in interviews, and then took another very famously insecure actor and named it after him.
Yep.
Presumably because Dreyfuss during the era was a very famous girdle wearing actor.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's no girdle big enough for me to star in a Hollywood film, so I'm not ripping on either of those guys. But it's funny. He's playing this leading man, and they wanted it to be have all this romantic energy to it, and it doesn't quite manage that. Nolte and Deborah Winger have unmistakable chemistry together, but it's comedic chemistry. Like, it's hard to explain what it is.
Yeah,
they're supposed to be these lovers who come together in this sort of misfit time, and that all happens as you'd expect, but it's something weird. Deborah Winger's weird. She's one of the weirder, kind of tougher chicks in all of Hollywood history, and she's certainly one of the best actors of her generation, without question.
Yeah.
But she's weird and prickly, and whatever her outlook on life is comes through the performance largely in these films. It's one of the reasons she's really fascinating to watch in movies, because her character's attitude towards John Travolta in Urban Cowboy, or Richard Gere in Officer and a Gentleman, like, that's certainly part of it. She brings the performance, but her attitude, Deborah Winger's attitude towards John Travolta, and Deborah Winger's attitude towards Richard Gere are in the film. They're very much a living part of the movie. Same with Terms of Endearment at all.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I mean, I really do think that's awesome. She's a person who brings a lot of herself to every role. Got her in trouble eventually, as you would think. She was sort of a difficult, I don't want to say she was too difficult to work with, because if you read back on what people found objectionable, it's all kind of BS. It's all kind of, if she were Harrison Ford, nobody would have a problem with any of it. But
sidebar, there's a great documentary of what is it called? Is it called Searching for Deborah Winger? What happened to Deborah Winger? It's just kind of about that very thing, how she didn't work for many years in Hollywood because she worked
the whole time and is still working now, but she was the it girl for this 6 or 7 year period there.
And it was one of the things I talk about in there is, it's like anything that she's accused of, if it were done by a guy, it would have never been nothing, even raised an eyebrow. Yeah.
She very famously dropped out of A League of Their Own because when Madonna was cast.
Yeah.
Because she just is like, oh, you're making a Madonna movie. Well, good luck. I mean, she had a sort of rigid way of looking at things, and a artistic sort of integrity that she was always hanging on to, even in a film like, we all love League of Their Own, but that film doesn't require her to be like that. And it really doesn't. And as good as Gina Davis is in it, though, it's a shame, because Deborah Winger would have been better. She's a better actor by half. Back to Cannery Row. It's a lot of will they or won't they. It's a bickery sort of old-fashioned relationship that they get into. It's got this multitudes of packed to the rafters of wacky, zany bartenders and street urchins and side characters and mother-in-laws and the whole works. And that Thursday story is really just about these old guys, which is this side story that really lives comfortably alongside this, that is just pure crazy Buster Keaton like physical comedy, with this great old Denver Pyle styled old guy voiceover that sort of tells the story of these Depression era adventures of these old winos.
Yeah, John Huston did that.
It's the guy who does the narration, of course.
Yeah,
just wonderful. It's a wonderful really wonderful film. It's goofy and stagey and strange, and it's not like anything really you've seen. The movie it compares closest to is probably Popeye from the same year.
That's exactly, yeah. That when you talked about the set,
doesn't have songs in it, but it has that sort of weird, out of this worldness to it. That's, yeah, I think is kind of wonderful.
The world that is created by building these crazy sets.
Yeah,
I mean, that very much informs
starts with that,
the whole.
Truly.
Yeah.
This fake Main Street and these just glorious sort of old Hollywood designs and things. It's and this matte photography and everything. It's really, really neat in that way.
Yeah. Okay. Up next is.
I don't think it's intentional, Joel. I think they wanted it to feel like a real place and they failed, but that the way it looks and the way it is such a character in the thing that it really adds to it.
I mean, I don't think it was, I certainly don't think that they, that they set out saying, we're going to create this world and these are going to be the crazy inhabitants of the world. No, I think it was like, I think in order to tell this story, we need, this is what the set has to look like in order to make, to probably very practical thinking went behind what it looks like. And also that's also it, there was still, we're coming out of the 70s and movie making in the 70s where everything started to get much more realistic, much more and then there was a move, sort of a movement, not a movement, but sort of an anti 70s type of, we wanted that
lean more back toward romantic escapism and good versus evil stories, definitely. And this is certainly part of that.
Yeah,
it's an adult movie, but it's joyful. It really is neat. Even when I was a kid, I found Deborah Winger and Nick Nolte boring as hell. But when they're hunting frogs in the swamp and stuff, I mean, I was riveted. I was super into it. Yeah. So it was a movie that, even like whatever 11-year-old Ryan like super dug.
I remember liking it too. And again, of so many of these movies, almost all of these movies I have not seen in years, but so many of them made distinct impressions on me, including this next film, which honest to God, I read the plot synopsis of the film to refresh my memory. And I'm like, I don't remember that. What? I don't remember. Wait, I just remember horses. There was lots and lots of horses. Got to go after a horse. Hey, look, there's horses coming. Oh my God, that guy died from a horse. And that is The Man from Snowy River.
Yeah, the first Australian Western that I remember. Yeah. Of which is sort of a Western subgenre, the Down Under Western. This is directed by George Miller, not that one, the other one. Yep, the George other T. Australian George Miller. Yeah, George what Miller? He's
George T.
George T. Miller.
Yeah. George. The T stands for George the Miller.
Yeah, it's great. It's a family movie about a kid whose father, he was raised on a ranch, but his father sort of lost the ranch, and so he's looking for work again at a tough time in history. And he's got this natural thing with horses, and it's certainly I'd say it was a movie for horse lovers because horses are really worshipped by the camera in it, but
yeah,
it has some really intense horse stunts at the end that might shake a real animal lover up a little bit. I think they give us these no animals were harmed thing in it, but it has this. It's like a 40-degree incline that these horses have to go down at the end. And there's this sort of weird chase that's real. It's brilliant from an action movie standpoint, but it's really, really intense. And you really wonder how no animals could have been hurt doing it. But the big thing, and Joel, I'm going to confess, the big thing it has Kirk Douglas playing twin brothers, two different characters in it. And the first couple of times I saw this when I was a kid, I didn't know they were twins. I thought it was the same guy. And I was super confused because one of them is the mentor, the Mr. Miyagi of this kid who's doing this horse business. And the other one is this evil rancher who's taken over all these ranches and stuff. And so to not know they were different characters you're watching it is really stupid. Like that's a stupid kid thing. but it's a different movie that way.
It's a very different.
It's a different movie when this crazy guy has this weird split personality than when it's two different people. But you gotta do, part of it is the film doesn't do the work of a same guy playing twins. They are almost in no scenes together, and they are very rarely ever shown in frame together. And of course, because that's hard to do, but you have to do it. You really have to set the movie that way and show us, here they are. Here's where they're different. They're on screen together. See, they're not the same. In my defense, Man from Snowy River doesn't do that. It doesn't do the work of that. It has a scene like that, and it has the scenes cross-cut between them. They're in scenes together, but it doesn't, probably because it was difficult to pull off, it doesn't do that. It doesn't nail that introductory Hollywood star playing twins moment that it needs, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In fact, the characters are introduced vastly different points in the film, which also is not helpful. You need to see them together. I think that's really important. I don't think I'm out of line by saying that.
No, I don't think so.
Lots of horses, really lovely folk sort of musical score, lots of great Australian outback locations, two really cute kids that you just, Romeo and Juliet style, one from the other side of the tracks, and the other one's is born to be a princess or whatever, and married to the richest guy in Melbourne. And it's lovely. It's really fun, lovely, like adventure story, family drama. I dig it. And it's a big widescreen movie. So these days you don't want to watch it on HBO. You want to, watch it on demand so you can get that out of it. But I watched it for the first time on HBO. I really liked it. So
yeah. Okay, next up, very different film than The Man from Snowy River.
That's what's fun about this show. Is a lot of variety.
I love it. This this is another movie. I remember this because I have memories of this one because for some reason I just remember how foul-mouthed the kids were in it, and hearing
it's not Bad News Bears, but there's one kid in particular who that's his shtick.
And that is Kenny Rogers as Brewster Baker in Six Pack.
I just watched Six Pack on Wednesday night.
Get out, really?
Yeah, I watched Six Pack and another movie that's coming up on this list. The two movies that they came out around Labor Day and my birthday party in 1982 when I turned 10, and 1983 when I turned 11. I went to see these two films with a group of friends of mine, because even back then, Labor Day was not when you put out your best films. It was an outdoor picnic holiday, and people didn't go to the movies unless it rained all the way across the country. Then you might have found yourself with a hit. Six Pack was a minor hit for a minor studio film starring a very pretty charismatic and yet not very skilled leading man in Kenny Rogers. Kenny had done the Gambler film on TV, which is a massive hit film. He was about to do a bunch of Gambler sequels, plus Coward of the County, which was another massive hit television film, but films based on the storytelling in his songs. This was just a movie. They I don't know, they wrote it with him in mind, but it became a Kenny Rogers starring vehicle, and he's great in it. He plays a small time dirt racetrack driver who by chance stumbles across a bunch of orphaned kids who are stripping vehicles of their parts and engines and things for a local evil sheriff played by the great Barry Corbin. If you need an evil sheriff, I mean, you got a lot of options, but he's the sort of Jackie Gleason of this film, and he's very entertaining. And the kids are fun. Anthony Michael Hall and Diane Lane, especially Diane Lane and Kenny Rogers. Diane Lane is acting circles around Kenny Rogers, which is that's pretty fun to watch. And because she's been in more movies than him, even at this point, even when she's 15 or whatever old she is, 16, it just knows what she's doing. And even Erin Gray, who's really cute in it and great, but Diane Lane's a better actor than her too. Diane Lane's better than the guy who plays Turk, the bad guy, who's also pretty fun in it. Only slightly so, but in their scene together, that's fun. Diane Lane's awesome.
She's good.
She really is. She could carry a movie all on her own, and she's this movie's secret weapon, in my opinion. But it's great. They hook up. You know, they strip his car, then he chases them down. Then they're all like, I was telling my friend Jenny, who I watched this with, she'd never seen it. Sort of mean to make her watch my old birthday movies one night, but I just had a hankering to do it, and I knew this show was coming up, and I thought, hey, well, let's do this. And it was fun. It was very fun, but very nostalgic night at the movies. But there's fun there's a bit of a spoiler, but I don't think much of one. It's just a minor detail for his Dark Materials series. But there's this great, in the season 2 of that show, or book 2, which if you're a reader or a watcher, there's this great weird world that they travel to where all the adults are gone and they've left these weird orphan kids behind. Yeah. And this movie has an aspect of that, which is why I'm bringing this up. It's great. And there's this scene where, there's all this conflict. There's all this Lord of the Flies like conflict between these kids. There's this scene where this physicist, this adult, what's important, not that she's a physicist, but she sort of shows up and she's looking for our heroes who've moved on at this point. But she finds these little feral children, the best of which is played by Bella Ramsey, who was so brilliant in Game of Thrones. And she's like, have you seen them or whatever? And they're like, oh yeah, we saw them. We were just here with them and tried to kill them. And then the look on the actor is a really great British lady. I won't say her name or ruin the rest of this, but the look on her face is one of horror. She's from our world, but she didn't want to hear that. And Bella's reaction is to her look of horror is, was that wrong?
Yep.
And she says, yes. It doesn't hesitate. Yep. Anyway, part of the side story, she sort of gets these kids where they need to go. And when they're parting ways, she says, would you stay with us and like tell us what to do?
Yep.
It's great. Kids who had no adult supervision, like left to their own devices. There's all Blue Lagoon's one of them. There's all these stories where how that can go horribly wrong through no fault of its own. We're a long rearing species of our children, and when you take that out of the equation, things go odd. And that they've sort of gone odd for these group of kids who've fallen in with criminals and stuff, and they're well-meaning. A couple of them are old enough to know, this ain't right. But it's fun watching them find a guardian who sort of needs them. And by the end, spoiler alert for Six Pack, they all become, through all this, racing hijinks, and the kids become his pit crew. There's 6 of them. They're very famously nicknamed the Six Pack. You've got the evil sheriff who's on the hunt, like all these Southern road movies of the era. You got some guy chasing you down from behind, and you've got another sort of evil rival race car driver who's really fun and chewing scenery. And it's a stupid movie. It's the home of the great film, or the great song, pop song of Kenny's, Love Will Turn You Around, which is one of my favorite songs of his, and wonderfully ties into the sort of climax of the film. It's neat. It's a fun film that if you've never seen it, it's worth a try. It really will. It really will be a trip back to your single digits, early tweens or whatever era in your life. It feels like that when you're watching it. And if you have seen it, it's worth revisiting, because it is about as good as you remember. And some of these are not. There just aren't. And this one kind of is. So I dig it.
Speaking of great movies that
Donald Petrie, well, just because we never talk about him, and we won't, but he directed it. He's a decent director. Yep. Charles Fox did the music for it. It's a lot of banjo, Dukes of Hazzard style chase music and stuff, but still pretty fun. It's very Dukes of Hazzard-y type story. That's about the level of storytelling we're talking about.
Yes, it very much is. The next movie is one of my all-time favorites. I think I brought it up on this on our show before at least once. And it is 1983's Max Dugan Returns. Yeah, this is a movie like if I came across HBO and this was on, it's like, nope, clear the room. I'm watching Max Dugan Returns. Here we go.
Herbert Ross directing, Neil Simon, starring Marcia Mason.
Yep.
For like the fourth of five times or something. Of course, the great thing about this movie, it has a couple great things. It got Jason Robards actually having fun in a movie. Not that isn't what we ask of him, but boy, is it fun when you see it. It's not, usually he's a pretty self-serious guy, and that's what he's asked to do.
Yeah.
He's having a really good time at it. And all respect to Marsha Mason, who's awesome, and Goodbye Girl and some of the earlier Neil Simon stuff. It's Matthew Broderick's movie, and he's early cinema role for him, and he's
his film debut. Yeah, his film debut, and he's really, really good in it. Donald Sutherland as sort of the cop love interest of Marsha Mason, yet also antagonist because knows that something's up.
Max Dugan is a criminal, and she's dating a police officer. It's fun. It's really overwritten, even for Neil Simon. It's really zap dap dap. The Marsha and Donald have these debates about literature, and I mean, it's that's none of that rings true like at all.
Right.
The school bullies are ridiculous. Everybody's super articulate. But it's joyful. The joy is in the writing, and that energy. No better guy on earth. And in a way, this could be on a Neil Simon episode. It certainly would be on a Herbert Ross episode. But to me, this is the movie. This is the after school special that was actually a movie of that era, more than most any of the rest of these. To me, this was I saw it on HBO, and I saw it again, and I saw it again, and I saw it again, just like you.
Me too. Yep.
It's so fun. It's so great. It's not War Games or anything, but Broderick's fantastic in it. And so if somehow you missed it, and maybe you didn't, but it wasn't some big hit. And as I said, it's legend because it doesn't have a supercomputer in it that starts World War III. It's not a high concept film. It's a situation comedy about a family, one of whom is kind of on the run from some con man jobs or whatever, but it's a family comedy. And in that way, it doesn't, it's legend. It is only within the hearts of those of us who saw it so many times.
Yeah,
it didn't really extend.
And it's wish fulfillment in the sense of you're a young teenager, and all of a sudden you wake up and suddenly all of these amazing top of the line things are happening, and your mom is going, no, we can't have this, we got to give it back, and you're like, what? No, oh my God, I got the hitting coach from the Chicago White Sox to come help me.
Come help me with my little league team.
Help me with my little league team. And like, no, we can't. It's everything. Oh God, I love this movie so much.
It's really, really neat. It's really neat. It's really, really neat. It's a story about, looking for belonging, but having it come in the strangest places. It's a film about redemption to a small degree, and about forgiveness. It's very thematically rich for something that's as cheesy and hoppity.
Yeah, watching it again as an adult, obviously the whole father-daughter relationship, the complex parental relationship really comes to the forefront. And and again, like you said, it is overwritten. I would agree with that. But Marsha Mason's really, really good. I mean, things that could be said in 2 sentences are said in 5.
Right. And I didn't really mean it like that. I just mean the dialogue is so stylized. Yeah. And like an Aaron Sorkin script is, or like a Gilmore Girls episode is. That's what I'm talking about when I say overwritten. It's every character is speaking with the author's voice in a very distinct way. And so in a way, it's a world from their mind and their heart, in this case, Neil Simon. And in the hands of somebody less depth or less experienced with that might be trouble. You know what I mean? In the hands of Ross, it's fantastic. In the hands of a guy like Rob Reiner, who I'm always ripping on, you're golden, because he's going to get to the heart of the thing. Yeah. And you can count on him to do that, and everything else is just fun. But not everybody can do that. It's hard. It's why Sorkin directs his own stuff now, and why I forget her name, but why Gilmore Girls lady directs her own stuff now, runs her own show, because not everybody gets it, when you're that unique. And I think Neil Simon, he's a populist writer, but I really do think he has a unique voice.
Right. Okay, I could talk about this all day, but let's move
maybe
on.
It'll come up again. Maybe because we've only touched on it, we'll get to.
Yeah. Next up is a movie that is also near and dear to my heart.
Reasons.
For very different reasons. This is, when growing up, my older brother and I were oil and water. We did not get along. We fought all the time, very different interests. But one place where we absolutely could agree is the movie Strange Brew.
Which is a movie about brotherhood, really.
Yep. And
Strange Brew was my turning 11 birthday movie. I had the Take Off to the Great White North single at home, and that got me to buy the album, which I put on a tape and just played constantly. The Great White North album. I had never seen an episode of SCTV, which is where the characters of Bob and Doug McKenzie were originated.
Yep.
But I knew enough about them from those things, and they made me giggle and they made me laugh. Their Take Off to the Great White North, which was a big top 40 hit, you don't hear much anymore, but their version of 12 Days of Christmas is the best version of 12 Days of Christmas ever.
Correct.
And that still makes the rounds every holiday season on the radio, as far as I can tell.
As well it should. Because
it's the worst. I mean, there have been some postmodern Christmas songs that are worse, but of the classic Christmas songs from the 50s that all the baby boomers love, 12 Days of Christmas is the worst, bar none. You can say, oh, it's this, it's that, but no, it's 12 Days of Christmas goes on forever. As soon as it starts, you're like, we got to sit through all this. It just makes you moan. There's a hole in my bucket. It's the old lady who swallowed a spider. It just goes on and on and on and on, and is terrible. And of course, the brilliance of Bob and Doug McKenzie, the guys who, quote, talk over songs and wreck them, is that they just only make it to day 6 before the whole thing falls apart. Falls
apart. And they're like, where are we? And then suddenly the chorus just goes, 12. Hey, we made it to day 12.
It's genius.
No,
it makes fun of that song in a great way, and
there are two acceptable
personalities to come.
There are two acceptable versions of the 12 Days of Christmas. The Bob and Doug McKenzie version and the Muppets with John Denver. Those are the two because again,
and in the opposite order, I would say.
Sure, yeah.
Because the Bob and Doug McKenzie one only works if you have a working knowledge of what the song actually is supposed to be.
And the Muppets version is saved by Piggy. Suddenly, just out of nowhere, just going bam, bam, bam. It's Piggy saves that song.
John Denver and the Muppets are, if you can experience one anyway, that's a good way to do it.
Anyway,
Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas for SCTV, Second City Television, created these Canadian characters. They're both Canadians. These low, hockey watching, beer guzzling, cigarette smoking losers. Basically, the Wayne's World owes a lot to these guys, because that's really what it is. It's like a cable access TV show by a couple of schlubs who are completely incompetent at communicating or accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
And somehow they got the rights to do this movie before, both Rick and Dave went on to much more notable things than these characters, but man, they're fun in it. This movie's ridiculous. It follows the story of Hamlet.
Yep.
It's
Hamlet
just a
is
story.
Hamlet is a woman named Pam, right. And Bob and Doug are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern,
with hearts of gold and no ulterior motives whatsoever, except to get free beer. And of course, it's also Hamlet, where the ghost of Pam's dead father actually saves the day, which is weird. Yeah. So it's got a possessed arcade game. It's got all these weird early 80s things in it. It's got a flying dog at the end.
Yeah, the flying dog who is painted like a skunk.
It's not
because why not? Whose name is Hosehead.
Hosehead is appropriate, but the fact that they paint him like a skunk is really funny, and the fact that then becomes a really important plot point later is really unexpected. You have
Rick Moranis drinking an entire.
And it gets zanier and crazier as it goes. Max von Sydow's great in it.
Max von Sydow as our villainous brewmaster
playing it. He knows totally what
it's
movie
so
he's in,
good.
but he plays it absolutely straight. Paul Dooley, on the other hand, is overacting like mad in a delightful way. And our Ophelia is played by our buddy Angus McGuinness, who we were just talking about a couple of weeks ago, as Rosie, the hockey player who had a mental breakdown and is now in an insane asylum and part of some evil experiments to take over the world. It's all in this movie. The movie can't be quantified by what it is or what happens. It's really, really fun. And it worked. And you know it is because everybody our age, at least the guys, saw this on HBO and saw it again and again, and just loved it. Loved the crazy humor in it. Loved how, as the final act is kicking in, it just got one more crazy, unbelievable visual sight gag after another. It's very funny, but the thing that really drives it along is Rick and Dave have this brotherly thing to them. They're very competitive. Dave is constantly talking about how he's going to turn his brother in for all the stuff that he didn't even do. There's this really funny scene where partway through it, they Scooby-Doo the mystery, and it's you guys go that way and you guys go that way. And Dave's like, good riddance to you or whatever. He's like, yeah, you go your way. And a couple minutes later, they show Moranis, and he's just crying because they've never
been apart.
Since Bob came out of the womb, they've never ever been apart. And you feel that like these two are, incomplete without each other. It's really, really fun. It's really fun. Very quotable, very goofy, super goofy, but smart in a way that it knows to. It understands its Hamlet references. You know what I mean? Like it's that too. But I don't want to sell it as some smart comedy, because whatever smarts are going on beneath the surface, it really is crazy and wacky more than anything.
Yeah, it is
a great scene. It starts out with them on their show, the Great White North Show, trying to show a movie that they made with their Super 8 camera. And it all, again, like everything, it falls apart. Nothing works. Everybody has to run out of the theater. And there's this great scene where they come up on the alley with this guy and his two kids. And the guy's like, they saved up their money for months to see this movie. And their kids are just forlorn and crying like the worst thing in the world had happened. They went to see a bad movie. It's that kind of world of the story where everything's heightened and crazy. And this actor he's like, what do I tell him now? Huh? What do I tell him? And Bob, oh man, I'm really sorry. He gives away his dad's beer money. And that's like the inciting incident that makes this whole film happen. It's really, really entertaining. I mean, that's not an iconic moment from the film, but watching it again, I'm like, gee, that is funny. Because really there's no reason for that level of melodrama to be happening here. But that's the joy of it. It's over the top, anything for a laugh, no holds barred, anything for a laugh. It's in this movie.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Let's move on and talk about the Osterman Weekend. Not a comedy.
No. Well, I think it is a comedy, actually. I think I don't know how it ends up this way, because it's a Robert Ludlum novel that's a very serious novel about this guy who's blackmailed into inviting all of his friends to his house in this sort of Big Chill styled reunion or whatever. But he's been told by the government that one of them is a Russian spy or an Eastern Bloc spy, and the whole point of the weekend is to ferret out who that is. That's an interesting idea, but it has all this farce. It has this really wicked movie poster with Meg Foster with like this one of those hydraulic bows and arrow things, like and her eye just lit by a little pin spot. And it looks like it's going to be this let's hunt the human like story, but it isn't. Yeah. It's a farce. It really is a farce. It's a weird, we're all trapped in the weird house together and all these weird scenarios happen or whatever. There's this scene where John Hurt, who's the government man who's sort of behind all this, or at least behind this plan, is on a closed circuit television talking to our hero and telling him what to do. And then a bunch of people come into the room and he has to pretend he's a newscaster reading the news while they're there. That's not a serious, that's, it's Ludlum. That's not a Born Identity style scene. That is a goofy Agatha Christie style farcical thing. And the movie is full of it. One of the weirdest things about it is Craig T. Nelson's character. He plays the jock buddy, basically, which is, he's super well cast at that. He goes more and more absolutely psychotic and insane as the movie goes on. This was directed by a super stoned and super drunk Sam Peckinpah. It's off the hook crazy. It's just a crazy, weird movie. It has no heart. It is not enjoyable like Strange Brew is.
Yeah.
But for the weird spy thrillers of its era, it's one of a kind. It's a train wreck of a film, but there's nothing else like it. And it used to play constantly on HBO because I don't know why, because I guess because nobody saw it in the theaters. And who's the star of it? I'm talking around him. Him and Meg Foster are the couple at the center of the story.
Rutger Hauer.
Oh yeah. So, that has appeal, right? Rutger Hauer. They all signed up for it. And I don't think any of them could have known that
it's Rutger Hauer, John Hurt, Craig T. Nelson, Dennis Hopper, Burt Lancaster.
Right. Read the premise. The premise sounds like it's straight up legit thriller. Espionage thriller.
Yeah, I mean the plot synopsis here is bonkers. It's long. Let me find
No, then don't read it. I don't want a long one. I want 2 sentences.
No, that's what.
If you go to IMDb, they give you.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. I
Okay.
had that up just a second. I was looking at something else here. During the Cold War, a controversial television journalist is asked by the CIA to persuade certain acquaintances who are Soviet agents of the Omega network to defect.
Again, that sounds like a Ludlum novel. It is.
Yep. In this adaptation of Robert Ludlum's novel, the host of an investigative news program has been convinced by the CIA that the friends and associates he's invited to weekend with him in the country are actually engaged in a nefarious conspiracy which threatens national security. And he's got to find out.
It's a bonkers film. Bonkers film. It's set up like a Ludlum novel, and I'm sure the novel is as good as any of his novels of the era. What it is a drunken, drugged out Sam Peckinpah fever dream. And because it's that, it's for cinema fans, it's not to be missed, even though it's for anyone who just likes a well-told story, it's probably not to be enjoyed either. It's hard to explain, but it's on the list. It definitely fits this list. And maybe it's the only place it fits. It's hard to say.
Right. All right. Next up is Brooke Shields is back. Yay! More Brooke Shields. This time she was on a deserted island, tropical island. Now she's in the desert of Sahara.
I loved this film when I was a kid, when it would come on Showtime. I loved it. I thought it was so cool. It's a race car movie. It's an old school, like when cars were new, race car movie. Brooke Shields plays the daughter of a wealthy automotive engineer who dies, and she takes his place in this invitation to a cross the Sahara Desert cross-country automobile race run by a bunch of people in Africa, I assume. And she gets kidnapped, and she falls in love with an exiled Arab prince played by French guy Lambert Wilson. And it also has all this sort of, it's a mad world, like those magnificent men and their flying machines, like hijinks with the other drivers and stuff. It's fun for old car nuts because there's all these cool old Packards and all these old dressed up race cars. However, I thought it would be better on home video and in high definition because it's shot by Andrew V. McLaughlin, who's a pretty good Western war movie director, not as good as Robert Aldrich, but along those same sort of lines. Directed a lot of Roger Moore films and things like that. And it's a widescreen movie, and I thought, well, for a widescreen adventure, it should look great, but watching it again.
Is this the other one you watched the other night?
Not very good. No, Strange Brew's the other one we watched.
Oh, nice.
The 2 birthday movies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I said we were there for years and years. I was the only person I knew, me and the friends I took out on my birthday party to see Strange Brew. only people I knew who saw Strange Brew in the theater. It was like a badge of honor. We saw that in the theater. We saw that opening night in the theater. It was me, my 7 friends, and 2 other guys. The theater was packed with people to see something. Yeah. It wasn't Strange Brew because the Strange Brew screening room was empty. But I just found out that Rob Dunkelberger saw it in the theater too. Our own Rob, super fan.
Rob.
So now I don't.
I will.
He's the exception that proves the rule, I guess.
I did not get a chance to see it in the theater.
Nobody did, man. It's the ultimate HBO.
Yeah.
I saw it on HBO movie. It really is.
Absolutely.
That's where its reputation was earned.
Yeah, and we had that. We taped it off of HBO so that we could watch it. Literally
on demand. Out the
tape. Wore out that tape. So anyway,
Sahara doesn't have a lot of nostalgia going for it. It's got a cool cast of interesting people. It is a cross-country race movie, but I was so bummed by how kind of bad just kind of how flat and bad it was, and not in a fun way. But it's still, I still really liked it when I was a kid on HBO, and that is where it lived. It's a Canon Film Group film, so I should have known it was going to be bad.
Let me share the 2 of the 3 taglines here that I really love. The hottest place on earth is about to get hotter.
Nice. I like that.
Love that. This one is also, she challenged the desert, its men, their passions, and ignited a bold adventure. That makes it so that's I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's got this great like Temple of Doom sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark artwork and stuff. I mean, it's sort of selling itself as this globe-trotting adventure in some exotic land. Mm-hmm. It's got a woman in the lead who's not a bad actor necessarily. She's not good in this, but she does have a certain. I mean, she's the screen loves her either way, so it doesn't really matter. Lambert Wilson actually is a good actor, but he's just treading water in it. I mean, it's just the script is rock dumb. It was approved by Golan and Globus and Israel, and they didn't really get what it was. They like with all their movies, they knew what kind of movie they wanted to make. They knew what kind of film they wanted to rip off, but they couldn't read something or even see dailies of something and really get what it was. So they're the weirdest guys to ever run a movie studio of their own, because this fundamentally don't understand basic storytelling rules. And as a result, even McLaughlin, even a screenwriter with some experience, could put together these things that just don't work for whatever reason. This isn't much worse than Richard Chamberlain and Sharon Stone and King Solomon's Mines. It's along those lines of quality. Masters of the Universe, all the other Golan Globus films. But it's not good either, so it's kind of too bad. Parts of it are kind of fun.
Yep. A movie that fair or unfair, I really associate this next movie with like the Reagan era.
Well, we're in the heart of it now.
Yeah, and it's
in the 3rd year of his first administration.
Yeah. And so we have Chevy Chase, Gregory Hines, and Sigourney Weaver. I can't believe we didn't talk about this more on the Sigourney Weaver deep dive.
That was best Sigourney Weaver performances.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And I stand by those 10 performances being better than this one.
I agree. But this movie is a deal of the century.
Well, it has this Caddyshack like Ghostbusters style cast, and we're right in the heart of when those sorts of things are happening. So I saw all those former Saturday Night Live stars. Anytime they showed up in something, I saw it. And this is one of those movies. This movie's a satire though. And even though there are tons of jokes in it, there are hardly any laughs. It's directed by William Friedkin, of all people, who brought you French Connection and The Exorcist. He has a massive autobiography, My Life in Film style book out there. This film gets exactly 0 mentions in it. It's like it doesn't exist. Okay. All that said, and it's a satire about the arms industry. It is an absolute send up of Reagan era 80s. However, it's told from a salesperson's point of view, which is a tricky place for a story like this to be told from. Chevy Chase plays an arms dealer in the early 80s who, while he's making some deal for a bunch of crap in some terrible country whose name we're not told and isn't important, stumbles across a fellow Western salesperson in the same hotel with him, I think Christmas Eve, played by the great Wallace Shawn. And with all due respect to Princess Bride, my favorite ever Wallace Shawn screen performance is in Deal of the Century. He takes stage in this scene like nothing you've ever seen before. He's this suicidal guy who's trying to make a deal and has been sitting by the phone for days waiting for it to ring so that he can sign on the bottom line, because he's your typical like Gil from The Simpsons, strung out, crazy sales guy. And he's about to shoot himself because he's gone mad as part of this process. Chevy Chase's character seems to talk him down from that, but then as soon as he turns his back, he does indeed kill himself. And of course, the phone starts to ring. And Chevy picks up the phone and becomes embroiled in this crazy, weird conspiracy to sell these failed drones. You can't make this up. These pilotless airplane drones that this fictional arms company Lookup has come up with, that when they demonstrate in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, when they demonstrated it in front of the US military and everything to make the sale, it went berserk and started shooting at everybody because they think because it got wet when they washed it for the show. And there's this great scene. Who's the name of the bad guy? And it's so awesome in it. It's his best career performance, in my opinion.
See, we have, is it the guy playing Stryker?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Vince Edwards.
Vince Edwards, so good in this movie.
Yeah.
This is, if the movie could have afforded another star, it's already got Sigourney Weaver, Chevy Chase, and Gregory Hines. If it could afford another star, this guy would be played by Dabney Coleman. And Dabney would have been great in it too. It's a perfect role for him. But Vince is maniacal in it. He's just biting off this part in this way that is delightful. And you see all these guys, first of all, when the thing goes, and this is satire, so you got to give it all a little thought for you to really realize it's funny. And a lot of this movie, you realize it's funny too late. You're not laughing at it when it happens. You laugh about it when you think of it. And this is the perfect sequence. Okay. Drone pilot. They're all proud of it. They're all these military bigwigs sitting in these grandstands watching the thing do maneuvers, when it freaks out and starts shooting at the cars in the parking lot and shooting at them. And the guys in the control room can't figure out what's wrong with it. And while they're trying to fix it, the air conditioner breaks. So you got two of these technicians trying to fix the air conditioner with like wrenches and stuff because they think that might be the problem. You got other guys doing this stuff. Vince Edwards, the guy making the deal, the executive in charge of the creation of RoboCop, essentially. That's what it reminds me of. It comes into this trailer and he's like, what? He sees this chaos going on. He's like, what are you guys doing? He's like, yeah, actually, we're not sure what's going on. We think it might be when they washed it for the show. It should be fine when it dries off. It'll work tomorrow. And Vince Edwards has this great line. He's like, tomorrow? There is no tomorrow, you assholes. Have you ever heard of rain? Huh? What?
Yep.
It's brilliant. And of course, so the thing's not going to be bought by any legitimate people with deep pockets. So the story of the thing is Chevy is appropriated by the company in place of this guy who killed himself to sell this to third world dictators and people like that so that they can at least make some of their money back on it.
Mm-hmm.
Sigourney Weaver plays the widow of Wallace Shawn's character. Gregory Hines in a great role, really weird role for him, but in a great role for him. He plays an test pilot who's a really great engineer who is brought onto even though he's found Jesus and wants nothing to do with war or violence or anything negative, really. He's brought on by Chevy for old time's sake to help him figure out the engineering problems with this thing so they can sell it. And it's just it's got so much memorable, crazy stuff in it. It's got some really objectionable stuff in it because it really shows the ugly arms industry mixed with the like trade show sleaziness of that world and the cynicalness of the arms industry and of selling war. It's just, and of exploiting the third world. And, there's a scene where the dictator, it's like his final, nibble that he wants from this deal for these, to actually lay down the money for these things. He wants to sleep with Sigourney's character. And Chevy's desperate enough that without asking her, he goes and proposes it to her, which she agrees to do in the movie, which is played for laughs. But again, if you really think about what all that is, it's horrific. It's horrific. But it was important. It was Sigourney's first go around with these crazy comedy guys. Like I said, a year later in Ghostbusters, that would become an iconic thing. But it was an early sign that she was willing to do that sort of work, which was fun because she was a very, even in this film, even in that film, she's this very dignified presence. She's a person that doesn't look like she belongs in this story, which is, of course, its charm.
Yeah.
Pines is fantastic. The film has a really pretty Firefox-like dogfight at the end between Hines in a stolen F-19 shooting at this peacemaker. It's very exciting and very expensive sequence. I like it. I like that movie. I liked it then because I just liked it. It was funny and exciting and all those things you want. But the more you think about it, the smarter, the really good satire that is. It really is a Reagan era movie. At the time, it felt like a Reagan era movie to me. Now, when I think about it, it's a very brave, it's just anti sort of Top Gun, anti-booyah story. It really shows a dark side of this stuff with a character who's really super morally compromised. And needs that the world needs him to fail, even though you're rooting for him. And Chevy's great in it because he's his usual improv-y, goofy self, but there's something else about him. He's a darker guy and he gets that. And I think Chase is interested in playing a part that has some depth to it. There's a dark arms dealer who, his brother-in-law says to him, they're having beers out on the porch. And he's like, you say you're going here, you say you're going there, you send us a postcard, and then 2 weeks later, these places don't exist anymore. What's going on with you, man? Your sister's worried about you. I mean, we're worried about you. So, but you can tell he's got a dark soul, and we're relieved to see him on a used car lot at the end in defeat.
Yeah,
he wins the girl. He takes a job selling shit because what else is he going to do? But you're relieved to see some normalcy come into his life because that merry-go-round he's on only ends one way. Right. And it's a deeper movie. Again, I don't know how much Friedkin has to do with it. He's not claiming credit for it. The script, though, I think is really, really smart. I really do.
It's I mean, it's again, it's kind of weird that he literally won't talk about it at all.
I don't know that it's David Lynch won't talk about Dune. David Fincher won't talk about Alien 3. I don't know that it's that or that he just doesn't have anything. He doesn't feel he has anything interesting to say about it. I have no idea. But hard people to work with. Vince Edwards, Chevy Chase. It would have been a set where if there were any disagreements, would have been a tough go of it for any director, I suspect. And it's Friedkin doing comedy, which as far as I know, he never did before or after. So there's that aspect to it too. And it bombed at the box office. It was a rather high profile, expensive film that bombed at the box office, but alongside, as a triple feature at night on HBO, alongside Police Academy and whatever, Dr. Detroit, like it fits perfectly. And and yet I think even compared to those things, it's much more substantive. No.
All right, let's move on to Uncommon Valor. This is a Vietnam.
It's the film that Rambo First Blood Part 2 ripped off.
Yeah, completely ripped off. Yeah,
completely ripped off the entire storyline of this movie. This movie's about a bunch of like, let's get the old Vietnam gang together and go back and rescue some POWs. Let's win the Vietnam War. There were a lot of Hollywood fantasies that was the fantasy. Let's get it right this time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, well, Rambo even says that. Are we gonna win this time? And are we gonna get?
I don't want to go if it's just to lose Vietnam again.
Yeah, and this is well, we got to go get my son. My son is trapped over there. I think he's still alive.
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman,
who brings a lot of gravitas to what is a really, really dumb story. Patrick Swayze's in it. It's got a really great cast. The Dirty Dozen-ish type crew that they get together are really, really fun. The big shootout and stuff at the end is, where they actually do find this prison camp and infiltrate it, is really shot in unlike Rambo, it's not shot in a big cinematic action way. It's very much you're on the ground with these people running around. It's a very has a lot of combat, or at least it feels like it has a lot of combat integrity, military integrity to it. But it really is a roundup movie. It's about these guys. It's about this father who's obsessed with saving his son and gets these people together, and he goes from place to place, and they train together, and you get to know them all. And then it's structured like the Dirty Dozen, but the kernel of the idea, which is a much more Reagan era idea than Deal of the Century, is let's win the Vietnam War for the Gipper, basically. I mean, that really is sort of the feel of it. But I like it, and I watched it a lot of times on cable. I like the wacky cast of characters, even though it's not a comedy at all. I liked all the mercenaries and their personalities and stuff. And this is the bomb specialist, and this is the pilot, and this is the this and that. That's fun stuff. I mean, that's why there's so many movies like that, because it works, right? But it's Hackman. I mean, Hackman, I don't know what Hackman saw in the character, the obsessed father or whatever, but it works because he's a part of it. And I believe it is directed by the guy who directed the First Blood movie, which is actually good. Ted Kochev. Ted Kochev.
First Blood. Yeah, sorry, First Blood. First Blood.
It feels more like that. It's cinema of that style. It has a artfulness to it and a visual flair to it and all that stuff. And so, and again, Hackman at the center of it. If it had been, just to keep quoting Rambo, if it had Richard Crenna at the center of it, it wouldn't have been nearly as good. And that's nothing against Richard. It's just Hackman a film like that needed a movie star with clout and with Oscars on his shelf to really make the thing fly. And that's what it got. So fun one.
Yep. All right. Last, certainly not least, because this is a movie that was also very ubiquitous on HBO.
Oh my God. This might be, maybe Beastmaster, but this would be a very close second for how many times did they play this on pay cable over and over and over again. And this was a film saw by nobody. This was a film that it took a year for it to get on pay cable before anyone saw it, because it was truly not viewed by anyone in the world. So much so that the songs on its soundtrack became a hit in the summer of '84 after it had made its run on cable TV, not when its soundtrack was released in 1983, whose record company had to scramble to reprint these albums, which eventually became a platinum selling soundtrack. It's a movie about music. It's about the golden age of rock and roll, really. It's an absolute baby boomer nostalgia fest, where at least at this time, he became something else as he got older, but at least this time, the baby boomeriest guy that you could get to make you relive your old memories, or that you could, as an older aged, like sellout yuppie baby boomer, could identify with, was Tom Berenger.
Yep.
Who plays himself as a guy in the 80s and a guy in the 50s, really not very effectively. I mean, the performance is good, but it's just not.
Yep. And we, of course, are talking about the movie Eddie and the Cruisers.
Eddie and the Cruisers. And there's also this conceit that Eddie, played by the great Michael Paré in a great role, And you have to give John Cafferty, who also plays him, wrote and sang all the songs basically.
Right.
That's part of the performance. It's a big part of the performance as well. He plays this supposedly ahead of his time sort of roots rock and roll guy that Tom Berenger hooks up with, plays organ and piano in his band. And he goes around and plays the usual events like a bar band would, plays in the bars, plays the wedding receptions, just does that sort of thing. But the interesting thing about the movie is it's a split time movie. And I think that's why the nostalgia works so well. I think if it was just a movie that took place in the 50s, Tom Berenger wouldn't get to play a teenager in it.
Yeah.
As that would make no sense. As it is, it doesn't really make any sense except for the fact that there's real value in the same actor playing the same part in both eras. That's important. And we can accept it on that level. We can look at it and say, well, this is his vision of himself and his memory. He's the one telling us the story. But there's this guy, like all rock and roll people who die before their time, Eddie, right when he was about to get a record deal and hit it big, and he had apparently made this album that was like way ahead of its time, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yep.
And now I can't remember the setup, but he gets a letter from him, or somebody does. It's this mystery in the present day where they think he might be out there and they might be finding him, and what happened to him really, and what really is the story behind him. Yep. And that gives us it gives us an excuse to travel through the 50s with this, or late 50s. It's really a mid 60s movie, which Quentin Tarantino will tell you is still the 50s. The 60s as we think of them is from it's really when the Beatles started getting serious. It's from about 67 to 73 ish.
Yeah.
That's what we think of when we say the 60s. Otherwise, from the end of World War II all the way till 1965, that's all the 50s, baby.
Yeah.
Enjoyed 20 years of Eisenhower and that sort of thing. And it's important that that's the 60s that this takes place in, the 50s, 60s. Sorry to make that so complicated, but I agree with Quentin's theory. From a pop culture standpoint, he's spot on. That is absolutely true. And that's the part we're nostalgia for. We're a little nostalgia for being hippies, but not really, because that's Vietnam and that's complicated and, blah, 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 but that sort of sock hop, thing, like they're super into that. American Graffiti proved that. Other things have proved that. It's the 80s mystery part of this, and none of it really works, and there's no real satisfying payoff to it necessarily. You do sort of find out the details. That's not what works in the movie. It is what drives the movie along. So I'm glad it's there, but if that's not what works in the movie are these great songs by John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, and watching the just 50s era heartthrob Michael Paré sing them, and this interaction between this relatively innocent suburban kid mixing with this bad boy rock star, and their sort of weird brotherly competitive effect on each other, and the sort of romances that they share and are competitive about. Like, all that works. All that's really interesting. And I dig Eddie and the Cruisers. And like I say, this wasn't a countdown, but it tops off this list, and it's appropriate that it does, because that film is beloved by many, and it absolutely made its bones on pay cable, without a doubt. Well, that film is nowhere if it's not for home video coming into its own, and HBO and Showtime and Cinemax just showing it constantly.
It was such a huge hit on cable. Embassy Pictures re-released the film for 1 week in theaters. And
it made more money in its week and a half or whatever release than it did on its original release.
Correct.
Yeah. Like I said, to me, it's a summer of '84 movie, so we're cheating a little bit. But technically it came out in autumn of '83, so we're
right, because it was. And it says that it was due to a scheduling error. It was supposed to be a summer movie, but it didn't come out until September. And all of a sudden, all the teenagers that it was hoping to attract, they're back in school, and so it went away. No one
A
saw
lot
it.
of an inordinate amount of these are September, October films, actually.
Yeah.
Non-Halloween September and October films, where that's not the worst time in that era for a film to be released. The worst time is in between the Oscars and like May. And now March is like a big blockbuster month, but that used to be just a dumping ground for the crap you wanted to get rid of. Right before the summer season came, you just would unload your garbage whenever all the kids in college were doing finals and nobody was paying attention to films. The second era is that right as summer's ending, the back to school, everybody's mind is on other things. And that has become the new, like, even we're heading into that right now. That really is sort of the doldrums. The horror movies and things sort of keep that alive and serial killer movies, but it's not a good time for a film like this to come out. This film was a phenomena, summer of '84. The songs were on the radio every day. Everyone was watching the movie. You could watch it at home already. That's when it made its bones. Yeah, almost an entire year later. But that's because of cable. I mean, that's where it was a hit. Yeah,
and that's where, I mean, and that's suddenly with cable and home video and stuff. That's when movies, that's why a show like ours exists, because that's where
so
we
many
discovered
of them took
a lot
on
of
a second life, or really found their first life. That is true to various degrees, but that's true of every movie on this list, because some of these barely found a life on cable, right, even if they, but that's where they're remembered. They were all basically theatrical flops. Blue Lagoon, not so much. To me, that's generational. I feel like we found it on cable. We found the naughty thing on cable. We're never going to talk about Hard Bodies or any of that crap on here, I can promise you. Although that certainly has place in our childhood memories. But that film, if there's a film that has a bit of an exploitation twinge to it, that you kind of, as a 10-year-old, you kind of couldn't believe what you were seeing on your TV. That was the experience of Blue Lagoon. That's why I included it. But Joel's right. It home video, we talked about it before. Back in the day, they didn't, when they were making movies in the 40s and 50s, they didn't have any clue that they'd be watched on TV for generations, that they'd have home video sales in the year 2000. That was unthinkable to them. If they put films out in re-releases sometimes, but they just had no sense of the value of the history of the thing. And of course, film fans that are a couple generations beyond those experiences, we're probably the last generation to really be obsessed with that sort of film history. It's really probably the boomers that are more than us, but still, the show encapsulates that. It was requested by us. Like I said, I had an idea for something like this for a long time, and we're going to do a few more of these sort of ideas, a little more genre specific ideas. But when we asked for a request, Bill, my buddy from that era, we saw a bunch of movies together. Bill was in the theater with me when we saw Strange Brew together. I suspect Six Pack as well, but I can't verify. He said, do movies that like you pretty much only watched on HBO. And I was like, we're going to do that. You have my word. I have to do some thinking about it, but you have my word. We're going to do that. And here it is.
And here it is. Here's our first trip down.
There's more. There's
HBO.
I saw it on HBO 1984 to 1986. Still to come.
Correct. All right. So before we ever do that, we're not talking about we're doing these. We'll get to other.
It's
HBO
not a series. This is for now. This is all you get. Next week, we're super excited to get the movie club back together again.
Yeah, movie club.
Go ahead. Talk about some dog movies.
Yep. Indeed, it's going to be super fun. We're
all three of them in the movie club, dog lovers, so that'll be a fun.
Indeed. We are talking about our Halloween. We're putting together our Halloween show with friends of the show, Michael and Rob, joining us for that. That will be super fun. And
it was really fun to have those guys together for the Stephen King episodes. This episode's a little more esoteric, but I just think it'll still be fun. Of course, I'm watching a whole bunch of current Halloween releases that are day after Halloween release will run down for you. And we got see if we can squeeze another spooky movie idea in there somewhere. we can think of one, we will.
Right. All right. So yeah, that's what we have coming up. And we thank you so much for joining us on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Love you
Take
guys.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.